Today's session is about what I named that David Slingshot. And actually, this is less about security, but more about architecture and constraints we are all facing when we either enter a new greenfield project or in most of cases, actually a brownfield for a project. And this is what I faced, let's say, a couple of years ago. First of all, there's a mandatory slide from my company. So I'm from INNOQ, working there for a couple of years already. So actually it's almost 4 years. And what we are doing is things like strategy and technology consulting, trainings, coachings in the area of software architecture. So you may know a couple of colleagues of mine. We do digital business models, develop digital business models. We are working on individual software development and technical infrastructure, things like that. So, and having said that, let's go further to the actual topic. Maybe a little bit about me, who I am. So I'm in the business for about 16 years, I think, right now. Actually, my background is pure security. So I was working for projects around smart cards, trusted execution environments, was even part of the trusted execution environment working group at, what was the name of the company, of the organization, Global Platform, sorry. And then was working also as a technical account manager for a vendor, security vendor, dealing with authorization, authentication systems. And then actually I wanted to get rid of security and went to INNOQ, but okay, they didn't let me lose that topic. That's why I'm still in it. And today, like I promised, we are going to talk about my brownfield project and the challenges we faced, or actually business faced, and how we were able or still trying to leverage them by using Ory products. So once upon a time, actually it was about 10 years ago when the next iteration of the system was in development. That was the context which was there was actually okay for the business itself. So there are mobile applications which you could use to manage your devices, so IoT devices which you can have at home to make it more convenient for you. You can access the same system also via the browser. And of course, the IoT devices make use of that to do whatever they have to do. And those days, the system was built like you can see here, it's kind of a mesh. Yeah, what you would name it today is kind of a distributed monolith. But initial, everything was great. Yeah, it was much better than it was before. But after a couple of years, the system ran into its limits, and could not scale the organization anymore. So in sense of what they needed to get as new features for the customers, etc. This is more or less the time frame where I entered the project. So it was about already 3.5 years ago. So actually I started at INNOQ. And those days, a lot of those items which built up the system, or subsystems, if you like, they were then redesigned to better suit the needs of the organization. Those were cut in pieces or reshaped around identified business bounded context, as you would name it in domain-driven design. And then the teams were organized around these new products to become more independent and to support faster time to market and also reduce costs. So just one thing to mention, in the past, the teams were responsible for the old setup. They were not able even to bring 3 to 4 deployments into production per year. But after we did that reshaping, so we have now about 100 deployments per day or even more. But then there was just one thing everybody was afraid of, and this is the remaining orange part, which you can see here. So, and this is what I'm naming Goliath in this talk today. So these old subparts or subsystems, they were reshaped, and they become kind of an SAS. So the teams were responsible each one or multiple SCSs. So what an SCS is, you can see it on the left-hand side. There's also a link if you are interested in. But obviously, some of them were still dependent on that on-premise system. And you may ask yourself, okay, how can it work? Yeah, you have a lot of things in the cloud, customer-facing stuff, but then there's still something in on-premise, and it will just bring your entire system down. Yeah, that's actually the issue, is scalability, etc. But why was everybody afraid of that remaining component? It's because it was, so part of that was a custom identity and access management system. So, and if you just take a look at the properties of CIAM in general, so if you Google for that, what you will see something like scalability. So this, so we have to be able to support spikes, for example, yeah, because of media announcement or holiday season. So the system is more in use those days. Then there are requirements from different governments, like GDPR in Germany, like in Europe, like CCPA in California, USA, and the other regulations. It should be kind of a business enabler, and all of that should be supported. But then there's also one additional thing which you can also read pretty often, and this is about centralized user management. So to gain insight into data of the customers or the rich customer profile, and this should eliminate actually different silos where customer data could resist in. And this was taken directly by the previous teams, so by Word, and that led to a situation that that system or that part was not only responsible for the actual CIAM, it was also responsible for subscriptions, it was responsible for content management, so documents for that, and also the versions and what the customer has signed, etc. And also for device management, because the devices are somehow actually linked to the customer is using that, so all of that stuff is inside. And so it's actually very big. It is also very, very hard to understand and to maintain. We have our clients like browser, mobile, those IoT devices, and they obviously use some API, some endpoints of those SCSs. But each and every endpoint is protected by OpenID Connect. So our tube is, but actually there's, so the only thing which is used there is just the information, is the user authenticated or not. There's no authorization in place. So the previous guy, Christian, if you saw his session, was talking about authorization context based on airbag, etc., and how they solve that. We don't have that at all, but we have this with our Goliath. We have this, brownfield setup, and we had to retain that somehow to still use the OpenID Connect protocol. We tried to solve that a lot. So we have multiple attacks onto our Goliath, but most of them failed. So most of you know Keycloak, yeah? It's a great product out there, which you can use for a lot of things. It should actually suit the entire purpose we need, but we failed. The challenges I will say you in a couple of minutes. We try to achieve the same with Microsoft Edge ID, with AWS Cognito, with Gigia, nowadays acquired by SAP, with Pink Identity, Auth0, you name that. But with all of them, we had a couple of challenges, so actually a lot of challenges. In our case, we don't really have 100% OpenID Connect protocol adhering to the standard. So there were some tailorings applied in the past, unfortunately. And we had to modify those products. So you can imagine modifying SaaS products is pretty challenging because you are dependent on the roadmaps of the organization. So you could do that with Keycloak, but it's also challenging. Then all the self-service flows, which are required by the business, so they all should have then been redesigned with the given product. For all of that, we had to migrate the customer data entirely before we could kill our Goliath. That was impossible. And the integration with STS, so if you have different actually autonomous teams which should do their work to bring things faster to market, and then you have to replace that monster here by something else, you have somehow put them all in one room and just lock them there until everything is working. So that would be that was also a big challenge, and why those attacks failed. Then integration with surrounding systems. So like for, I don't know, business and intelligence purposes. There are a lot of products out there, and some of them were used in the project as well. And of course, integration with the Goliath itself, because you would not be able to move everything out of that, because it would be very complex. And the products which I just showed here, they are pretty complex by themselves. So it's because they actually focus on authentication, but they have much more in them. And we will then talk in a couple of minutes about what that means in my context or in our context. So, and the problem was that all those challenges had to be done in one big step. It just doesn't work. One day, a colleague of mine, Falk, asked me whether I heard about Ory. That was the first time, so it was, I think, 1.5 years ago. I said, no, take a look. Yeah, it looks very promising, because they are following our microservices approach. So they have dedicated staff for specific purposes. Yeah, small things which do just one thing and do that very good. Yeah, and this is where my journey with Ory started. You saw that slide already, and here we have our STS and the ODC connection towards Goliath. So what we did is just put Ory Hydra here, and that basically allowed us to make the system much more resilient, because this way, if Goliath goes offline, for example, because of maintenance or of a rollout of a new version, nothing will break. At least most of the stuff will still work. Even if the token expires, everything is handled by Hydra. So there are a lot of pros. Yeah? Like I said, resilience improvement, latency improvement, because the Goliath, in our case, like I said previously, is an on-prem installation. And depending on the region, that on-premise installation, so the products is available around the globe, that on-prem installation is not close enough. So there are latency issues that end customer might face. By just putting Hydra in place and putting that in the region, so cloud region, where the actual SSs are running, we have a lot of latency improvements. In this way, also the user experience improvement. We have a lot of cost reduction, because in our case, our systems are running in EKS and AWS. And as you might know, every outbound, so egress connection from AWS to something else costs money. Yeah. By just doing that, the only connection which is required then from cloud, unfortunately you cannot see my mouse, so from Ory Hydra or the service towards Goliath, they are pretty much minimized by 99%. And that basically means we reduce a lot of costs here. The setup is customizable, so we can do a lot of additional things which we were not able to do in the past. And the most important part for us was we don't have to make any changes to the clients. This is great. Yeah, no changes to the Goliath, no changes to the client, no customer data has to be migrated. Everything can remain as it is. The cons, there are of course cons as well. Our out proxy must be multi-tenancy capable, which was not the case in our case. So our SSs had to update all the out proxies configs. And there's a glue code required, but this is actually not an issue, because it's about getting more control, correlate, and not to be subordinate to our Goliath. And then, of course, there are some consistency issues which we buy in, but it's just to compare things like ACID and cap theorem. Yeah? We have a distributed system, so it's obvious we will lose something. But this was a great thing. So, and this setup looks more or less like that. Yeah, it's obvious from also Ory documentation. So now we have that stone thrown towards the head of our Goliath, and Goliath is lying down on the ground. Next step in our case is just to take his swords and cut his head off. And this is something we do with Ory Kratos. Again, we have integration required, some glue code, which will deal with maybe profile information, etc. But it will help a lot. And again, we have some pros. Yeah? Again, resilience improvements, latency improvement. It will be much easier to understand because, like with Hydra is responsible for just one specific thing, and it just does it great. Same is true for Kratos. We have, based on that, lower maintenance effort and thus a lot of cost reduction as well. And again, we don't have any changes to our clients, and we have a much better user experience because we can do much more things which we were not able to do before. And even we use Kratos, we don't have a full migration upfront to do, because we can integrate Ory Kratos by just modifying some pieces of code directly and then remove it again when the migration, which will be done on the fly, is over. And there are a lot of further incremental enhancement possible, which we were not able to do before. Obviously, there are also cons, yeah, like glue code, but we were talking about that, like customization of Kratos, but that's fine. In our case, Optady Connect is actually clearly the wrong protocol for the use case, at least for the browser-based applications, so what we name web touchpoints. Just by doing that, we again can reduce a lot of dependencies and make the setup much more cleaner. And like previously, there are pros and cons. Yeah, so this case, in this case, there are no changes to our SCSs required. The biggest pro, we don't abuse OpenID Connect as a protocol or R2 protocol. So we don't need those additional things which we have now to maintain, and which actually make it right now very hard to us to migrate further with Hydra. And we have, again, much simpler setup and can, again, reduce costs. In our case, this is, we have to change all the SCSs. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much. I'm a little bit over time. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Dimitrij. First of all, thank you very much. That was extremely interesting. And I can see you've been very good in the whole Ory community. So thank you for taking that time to talk to us about it. We did have some questions. I'm just going to paraphrase one of them. It's around, I think, multi-factor and Goliath. How do you do that, or how are you solving that?
So multi-factor is, as of today, not in scope in our case. So we were waiting for Ory Kratos to come up with that. So we'll, of course, make use of that. But as of today, the setup on our Goliath side does not have MFA supported as well.